And now welcome back to chapter 11, and now you can show me the money. All right, so for today, we're going to look at, after a quick review, we'll cover chapter 11. It covers two main things, which is methods of payments, and then the overall how do we process those payments once we get them. So let's dig into the review. All right, so we've been talking a lot about different concepts, from the Internet Foundation, which we covered in chapters 1 and 2, to the web server, the website, revenue sources, web presence, advanced technologies like social media and online auctions, and then the marketing and B2B that go on top of all that. And all this is wrapped around a legal and ethical environment. So what are we going to talk about today? Well, really, we're going to kind of zero in on two topics we've talked about before, and revenue sources and the website, and add in a little bit extra onto the legal and ethical environment discussion. But our goal is to see not just the revenue sources, but how do we get the revenue to our website, or through our website, and into our bank account. Because that is kind of the key. We want to get the money from the customer into our bank account as businesses. So, how to pay? Well, there's a lot of different forms of e-commerce payment, okay? There's some very, very popular ones like credit cards and debit cards. Debit, how about debit? Misspelling there. We have electronic cash. We have electronic wallets, and those kind of the big three. So what I want you to start thinking about, though, personally, how do you pay for things online? Most of you, I'm sure, have bought things online. Or if you haven't done it yourself, you probably know some people that have. So what have they done? Do they use credit cards? Have they used PayPal? Have they ever used electronic cash or even an electronic wallet? Well, what is an electronic wallet? You may not even know, but you may have used it. Think about what issues you've had with paying online. It could be that you've had to fill out tons of forms and you always make mistakes on those forms. Or you might have problems with, after you make your transaction, you don't get the product you asked for. What other types of issues have you had? If you're active on eBay, there's all kinds of interesting things that develop from being able, not just knowing that you can trust the people you're sending your money to, but what types of payments do they accept? And have you ever not bought something because they don't accept the type of payment that you want them to? Okay. So what to you would make purchasing online easier? So if you get a chance, write down a few things right now. Write down, based on your experiences or the experience of people that you know, what would make purchasing online easier? So if you need to pause this video for a minute to do that, please do so. Very, very important before we get into the next section. All right, moving on. So today, in regular transactions, all transactions everywhere, 90% of those are done through cash, check, credit cards, or debit cards. Okay? And hopefully you know the difference between a credit and a debit card. See, this time I spelled debit right. Credit cards, basically you are creating an account that you owe to somebody at the end of the month. A debit card automatically debits your account, takes money out of your account to pay for things immediately. Credit, you're building up, you're taking a small loan. That's essentially what you're doing. A monthly loan that you then repay at the end of the month. But other than that, they're very, very similar. You have a card that you carry and you swipe and you pay for things, right? Cash and check, well, honestly, for me, I write very, very few checks anymore, and I prefer to walk around without cash. So I would say even for myself, 90% of all my transactions are done with credit cards and debit cards. So online, though, credit cards is by far the most popular payment system. Credit, and I also include debit card in there. Any type of cards that you have a number, you type it in, you click submit and send. what are the major, so we see it's a major advantage to do this. It's able to type in a number, the expiration date, click submit, and automatically debit your card. That's great, right? Why do merchants, so what are the major disadvantages? Why would merchants not want to use credit cards when accepting them? Okay. Now, it's very often used, and a lot of merchants do accept credit cards. But why might they get frustrated with this? And this takes you a little bit of knowledge about how does credit card transactions work. Does anybody know? If not, do a quick search. You'll find some very interesting things. The biggest thing, it costs merchants anywhere from 2 to 5% of every transaction is paid in fees to the credit card company. So yes, you sometimes have to pay late fees if you don't submit your payment on time. And certainly credit card companies make a significant amount of money on that. They also make a significant amount of money from the merchants themselves. From anywhere from 2 to 5% of every transaction is money that goes directly to the credit card company. Why is this a disadvantage for merchants? Well, many merchants have very slim profit margins. Okay, they may be selling a product that's only 10% marked up, which means 10% above their baseline cost. Now, if a credit card company is taking 5% of that, of that 10%, they're only left with a 5% profit versus a 10% profit. That's a huge difference for them, okay? That could easily, if everyone stopped paying cash and started paying credit cards, it would drop their profits in half. And that's huge, okay? Now, there's a lot of products out there, too, that have far larger markups, that they have a big enough window that they don't care. Okay, that it wouldn't impact their profit margins quite as much. But it is still a major factor. Why do merchants then accept credit cards? Because everybody has them and everybody wants to use them. And so to make their customers happy, they go ahead and accept them anyways. And they also find that people tend to buy more when they're using credit cards rather than when they're using cash. So psychologically, people end up spending far more with a credit card than cash. So the merchants end up doing okay, all things being considered. But let's look at how the credit card purchase works, because online this gets a little bit more complex. And so imagine you're sitting at a computer, right? You're this little lady sitting down here, sitting at your computer. And you're going to a website, let's say Amazon.com. So you travel through the internet, you go to the merchant's website, and they deliver all the pages to make you go through your shopping cart purchase. And then you go to checkout, you type in your credit card number, and you click submit. What happens? Well, at this point, the merchant website, once they have your number and all the relevant information, has to send a request, payment card authorization to the card company, whether that's Visa, MasterCard, Discover Card, American Express, yada, 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 right? So whoever this authorization company is, they send a request to them. And then they verify that this is a legitimate number, legitimate account. Account isn't overdrawn. So the merchant can then proceed with the transaction. Well, then the credit card company, every credit card company is associated with some bank, right? The credit card company itself is not a bank, but it has an issuing bank, a bank that where the money comes from. So the credit card company sends the money, sends a notice to the issuing bank saying, send money to the merchant bank. So the merchant website has their own bank. The issuing bank then will send money through what's called the ACH network, the Automatic Clearing House, and we'll talk more about that in just a few minutes. Through that network to the merchant bank, now the merchant gets paid. Now, you would think this is all done electronically, it happens super fast. Well, yeah, it does, but not instantaneous. And so there is a delay from when the merchant makes a payment till it actually shows up in his bank. However, the fee is taken out immediately. So as the payment authorization company takes off 5% or 3% or whatever it is, they keep that money the issuing bank sends the remainder of it to the merchant bank. Later, the payment card company sends a bill to the customer who made the purchase. And then that's when the person actually pays for it later. All right? Okay. So that's the basics of how it works. So every time you make that transaction, every time you click on, when you're buying something online and you click the submit button, you have to go through this process of authorization. And if you're ever creating an e-commerce website, that's one thing you have to include in it. And that can get a little bit more complex, is authorizing every credit card that comes along. So that's why there's a lot of companies who have developed applications for doing e-commerce for you, to save you all that headache of getting through the authorization for all these different credit cards. It can be kind of a pain, but it needs to be done if you want to accept this for all the customers, which most customers want to use credit cards. So what are the alternatives? One is electronic cash. And you might be going, what the heck is that? Well, the idea is to have a stored value of cash in digital form, useful for paying goods. So, for example, you would write a check or mail in some cash to a company, and that company would then convert that cash into a digital form of some manner. Okay. Sometimes this digital form is a one-to-one basis, so $1 equals one digital cash. In other cases, it's kind of a floating value. So recently there was a company called, I believe it was Bitcoin. It has had some problems lately, but the idea was to create a floating value of digital cash that essentially it was based on the market value of whatever that cash was. It slowly grew over time to handle the growth in the demand. And it was supposed to be used as a trading medium, sending cash back and forth between people. It's supposed to have some embedded security built into it. However, they ran into some issues. For example, I believe one of the people who said they were going to create a bank for this digital cash at Bitcoin suddenly absconded with all of the cash that he had stored in there, really kind of upsetting the entire marketplace. So there's been a lot of efforts to create this viable eCash, and most of the time it fails. All right? One of the biggest issues is trust. Can we really trust this company who says they have all of our cash in digital form? Okay, because how do we know they're not magically making up additional digital cash? I mean, it's just a bunch of ones and zeros, right? I can add ones and zeros really easily. How can we verify that what they've done is actually legit? Okay, that they're not making up new cash magically from nothing. Okay, so trust is a very, very big issue. Secondly, you have to have enough merchants who will accept the eCash. Because if there's not very many merchants out there who accept it, nobody's going to want to use it, and they don't use it. Okay. Number three is that it often requires very complicated software to both store it, to manage it, and to send it. Okay, and we're not, because what you're dealing with is a very high value item, digital cash. So you have to find some security mechanisms, very complex algorithms for securing that in a way that can prove that what you're sending and what you're receiving is viable, right? And this is all topped off because there's no standards for it. And so that's why you'll have some eCash that's considered a one-to-one value. You send them in $1, you get $1 of eCash. You have other systems like the Bitcoin, which fluctuated. And there's very, very many variations in between. No standards for this. So how do we know that, how can you compare one set of cash to eCash to another set of eCash? It's not so easy to do. Now, this being said, there's an important differentiation here between eCash and what might be considered digital transmission of actual dollars. Okay. And what I mean by that, if I create a bank, right now I have an online bank that I pay my bills through like electronic checks, so an online bill pay. I never write out a check. I never send them cash. I have an electronic check sent, and then they wire money back and forth. Right? They're still dealing with traditional dollars. And even though it is an electronic form, they don't consider it e-cash. E-cash is considered a separate standard from the traditional US dollars or whatever dollar system you use in whatever country. The only winner, the only person who really has any e-cash type system that has been viable has been PayPal. And even then, they use a one-to-one basis. So if you want to, you can write a check to PayPal and they'll store it in their own bank, and then you can use that to pay for bills. Okay, and I really think this is the only way it's going to be able to go forward is by doing this one-to-one. $1 is worth one e-cash. I clearly can't see it working any other way. And all the efforts to the contrary simply won't fly. All right, so let's talk a little bit more about eBay, right? Or PayPal, I'm sorry, which is owned by eBay. Which was funny because eBay developed into its own little ecosystem of online auctions, and PayPal was a payment system designed specifically for eBay. However, PayPal expanded much beyond that, so it became an anywhere payment system. eBay saw what PayPal was doing and tried to duplicate it internally, so they created their own payment system. It flopped. Okay, everyone was already using PayPal on eBay, so eBay said, well, we can't build our own, we're going to buy you. So eBay bought PayPal, okay? And you can use it on any online auction on eBay if the seller accepts it, and most of them do. You can also use PayPal on any other website that you want to. And in fact, you're seeing that more and more. I think many main companies, bigger companies, even things like who was it? I just saw in the news recently. I want to say something like Lowe's or it's Home Depot. Home Depot now is accepting PayPal payments, which I thought was very interesting. So what does PayPal do? It does more than electronic cash. You can connect your bank account and your credit cards to a PayPal account. And so whenever you go to make a payment, you can choose where the money's coming from. Directly from your bank account, from your credit cards, from debit cards. You can use PayPal to make donations. And there's just tons and tons of different options for what you can do. Okay, you can have multiple bank accounts, multiple credit cards, and you can send your money, you can collect money. And I did this once with a nonprofit organization. I actually set up a PayPal donate button, a really easy way to collect donations. And so you say, hey, it doesn't have to be much. Give us $5. If you already have a PayPal account, it's really easy. Just click this button and send us, a few bucks, and you can immediately have that deposited into your bank account. That's sweet, right? Go check out PayPal if you haven't, and set up an account because it's got a lot of flexibility. The problem with PayPal is that they also require high merchant fees. So the merchant pays 2.9% plus 30 cents for every transaction. It's very similar to a credit card. That's not cheap. And so a lot of people tend to it's one of the costs of doing businesses, I guess you would say. All right. That being said, it is free for people to send person-to-person payments within the U.S. if you do it directly from your bank account. So PayPal does have the peer-to-peer, from person-to-person payments is free. You don't have to pay the merchant fee. That's very nice. All right. All right. What PayPal doesn't do well. Okay, so PayPal definitely has found a great marketplace, found a great place in the market. It does have high merchant fees, and so there are efforts to go lower than that. If you want to check out a new system called Dola, which is supposed to get around a lot of that, I believe their fee is 25 cents flat. There is no percentage. So any high dollar item that you want to use, what I found with Dola, I've used it once, was that it took obscenely a long period of time to get my payment from them to me. I won't go into the details, but yeah, it took like a week from the time the person paid it till it showed up in my account, and then another week from when it showed up in my account until I can deposit it in my bank. So basically 2-week period, float period between sent to I see it. Okay. To me, that wasn't acceptable. 2 weeks is far too long. I want instantaneous. In fact, now I have my mobile phone. I can take a picture of a check and have it submitted immediately. That is far more efficient. I love it. And so there's problems with the way PayPal is doing it, right? Excuse me. All right. They also have a mobile app, and unfortunately that mobile app is very limited at this point. However, it's something that they can easily improve upon if they work hard at it. And they have to overcome, there's some new startups that are really pushing hard in the mobile app arena for payment systems. If PayPal doesn't get on the ball and doesn't radically improve it quickly, they're going to see themselves struggling in the mobile arena. And I think they have a good opportunity here if they really tried hard. They just haven't yet. All right, so eCash is somewhat useful, but is struggling. There's also a concept called the e-wallet. So if you think about your wallet, you think about what you all carry in your wallet. It's not just cash, but you have all your credit cards, you have multiple credit cards, you might have your driver's license, all kinds of personal information, right? Where did the e-wallet come from? Well, it came from the difficulty of filling out these e-commerce forms to make purchases. And at one point, it was estimated that 25% of all customers quit the purchase because of these difficult forms. 25%. Now, can you imagine if you could improve your form so that you get 25% more customers? Now, how sweet would that be, right? Well, the e-wallet was designed to overcome a lot of these difficulties of filling out credit card numbers, shipping addresses, billing addresses, all this redundant information being filled out over and over and over again for all these online transactions. So what did the electronic wallets do? Well, traditionally, they were client-side software plugins. In other words, they went on the customer's computer, usually a plugin for their browser that would store all that information for them. There's also e-wallets that are server-side versions, but these are specific for a particular company, like Amazon. So Amazon.com has their own version of the e-wallet. And, I'm a heavy Amazon user, and I have a lot of my information already stored on Amazon. So I have my credit card, I have several credit cards stored with them. I have several shipping addresses stored with them. And because of that, whenever I go to Amazon, when I go to check out, I log in with my username and password, but it has all the information I need. With a couple clicks, bam, 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 I get my products. And they're delivered, whenever I ask them to. Now, today there's also a greater growth in e-wallets that are supposed to be designed for merchants who don't want to have the server-side version themselves, but want to have something what is server-side, I should say. These are server-side, but they're designed to be work across different merchants. So Amazon has your own specific one. But if you use Windows Live ID, Yahoo Wallet, PayPal, or Google Checkout, they each have an e-wallet that you can use, assuming the merchant installs the correct software. They can use one of these wallets to check out their customers. Okay. and it has all that same information that you might want. Ooh, yeah. All right, now, what's happened in the e-wallets? Well, we see that today, most of the newer browsers provide a built-in ability to store that form data. So you know how I said that traditionally it was a client-side software plugin for the browsers? Well, now the browsers do it automatically. Well, this makes the e-wallets far less useful than what they used to be. They're still out there. But now we have the capabilities of storing a lot of the credit card numbers and shipping addresses in the browser. And so when you go to a specific website and you start filling in the form, your browser recognizes what you're typing in and usually gives you a hot link that if you click on it, automatically populates all the data in that form, saving you a bunch of time. So e-wallets are not quite as useful as they once were. They're still used and still used quite a bit by different merchants. But what we're finding is a lot of e-commerce sites don't necessarily have to have them to be done well. Okay. What's taking its place? Well, what we're finding now, we're moving to phone apps. So it's not just for online purchases. You're going to find e-wallets that work in a lot of different genres. So for example, if you go to this link here, google.com/wallet, they'll talk about a new phone app they have that it's just you install it on your phone, on an Android phone, and for merchants, you know, these are traditional merchants. They would need to install special software, and it requires near-field communication. And a lot of new cell phones have this built in. It's kind of like Bluetooth, but for a shorter distance. So instead of being, 6 feet away, near-field communication, you have to be like 6 inches away. And what you do is you walk into a merchant, you have your phone on you. You might have, I don't know if you have to open the app or what, I've never used one. You might have to open the app, but then all you have to do is wave it in front of a scanner that's right there at the checkout counter. So when you're ready to check out, after you go and scan, all the items are put into the register, and they sum up the total, you just wave your phone in front of this scanner, and bam, you paid for all your goods. So now guess what? You don't have to carry your wallet with you. All you have to do is carry your phone with you, and your phone can do everything that you want it to do. That is freaking awesome. Okay, I'd love to be able to get rid of my wallet and just use my phone. All right, so definitely very popular. I think you're going to see this growing significantly over the next few years. This capability. And it's not just Google Wallet. There's also, I believe, a company called Square who also has a payment system, although I don't know if they use near-field communication. If they don't, they should add it. But they have two. We talked about Square earlier with the mobile commerce. But they have the card reader, but they also have a separate app too that's designed for payment when you walk into merchant stores. All right. So that's the e-wallet. It was really big. I would say it's still used in various forms, generally more server-side versions, although we find that the browsers today are taking over a lot of the work for what the client-side software used to do. So you've seen it far less used, far less popular than it once was. But that capability, though, I don't think is going to go away. People want to have an easier way of filling out forms. They don't like having to enter redundant information over and over and over again. So that covers the three big things with payments and how to collect money, okay, revenue. So let's get more into the processing. And to understand how the processing works, you really have to understand about how the banking industry works. Now, I'll be the first to tell you, I'm by no means an expert on the banking industry. So what I'm telling you is just my layman's basic understanding of what's going on here. All right. So the two big things we're going to talk about is the clearinghouses and then various problems with banking. Okay, and well, one of them also kind of deals with electronic cash, but the two big ethical issues legal issues in the banking industry. So let's start. What do banks do for you? So, most of you have bank accounts, I'm going to assume. What do they do? Okay. For me, there's several things, right? I store my money in there. They also provide the ability for me to get that money out, either through writing checks or through debit cards. Okay. They also give me the opportunity to make loans. So after I deposit money, somebody else might take some of that money as a loan to do something else with. All right, so there's only a few major jobs that banks do. But generally it is protecting money that you deposit and then trying to make money off of that by giving out loans to people who can pay them interest back. How do the banks do that? Okay, so how do they store your money and how do they help you pay for things? Well, like I said, they have vaults that they put things in. They give you accounts to keep track of the money that you've entered and the amount of money you've taken out. Right? Those are the big things. When you take out a loan, you keep track of how much money you still owe them. Well, one of those ways that money can go back and forth between different banks. So if we have multiple people that each have a bank account and they want to make transactions between them, well, yeah, they can use cash. But checks became really popular, specifically back in right around the beginning of the Industrial Revolution. It was the 1800s. In the 1800s that banks really started seeing a lot of growth because there was a lot of money, a lot more money than what there used to be. People started using checks. Okay, they had this as a recent innovation. So you're writing an IOU for somebody, and they say, go pick up this money at this bank. And that's essentially all a check is. It's saying, I owe you this money, go find it at this bank, here's my account number, here's my signature to approve of giving you this information. Okay? In shorthand, that's all it is. Right? So how do the checks work? Right? So if I write somebody a check, that check has to be shredded with my bank. So this is money coming out of my bank. And I give that check to somebody else. They take that check to their bank. Now we have two banks involved, right? That second bank has to get the money from the first bank. Somehow. Right? So here's what's going on. Okay? So one bank might have a whole bunch of checks that go to like 4 different or 20 different or 100 different banks. Well, they have to go to each one of those banks and say, hey, I want my money for these people's accounts, right? So you've promised this money. Give me the money so I can put it in the right accounts. Well, that's all fine and dandy. And then so they have to walk to these banks, pick up the money, and then carry that money back to their bank. Well, every one of these banks have the same thing. And so each one of these banks have to send somebody to the other banks with the checks for each of the individuals, pick up the money and bring it back. Now you can imagine, now just look at the mess, and this is only 5 different banks. Imagine if you have 20 banks or 100 banks. How many people are going to be running back and forth with checks, trying to get money for each of these accounts? And you got to do this every single day. Okay, maybe you do it once a week, but this is too much running. Even so, once a week for 52 weeks a year. That's a lot of running around, and it's a lot of money to be carrying around on the streets. Okay, how are you going to have to? You don't want to have to pay people lots of money to protect that money that can move it, because that's going to get really expensive real quick too. Right? So it was a major. Although checks were very convenient and people liked the concept of them, the banks quickly realized this is a very burdensome. A burdensome process, and they quickly realized they needed a better way. And that's where the idea of a centralized clearinghouse came from. It first started, I believe the very first one was in London for a lot of the London banks. Okay, so rather than sending all the checks to all these different banks, what they would do is send all their checks to one central location, their clearinghouse. And in this clearinghouse, there was several accountants or bookkeepers who would go through all the checks and write up pluses and minuses for each bank, who owes what money. And then at the end of the day, they would sum up and subtract everything and send back to each bank their respective differences. Okay, it greatly facilitated the process of getting the money to each bank and made it so that you don't have to send 20 different runners out to 20 different banks. You send one runner to one bank, you do all the sums up, and then you send it back to the bank at the end of the day with the cash that you either owe or are either that you're debiting or crediting, right? So that's where the idea of the clearinghouse came from. So basically the centralized location of adding and subtracting all the differences in money. Well, guess what? Adding and subtracting money is a very, very simple thing to do for computers. So when computing systems came around, obviously the bank said, hey, why don't we do this electronically? And that's where the automatic clearinghouse came from. So we basically took all the bank accounts and digitized them. So the value of each account is recorded electronically. It makes it easy to credit and debit each account electronically. And we can send electronic messages through the automated clearinghouse. So the automated clearinghouse is now, instead of a big building, it's now a bunch of computing systems. When we want money from one bank to send it to a different bank, it goes through the automated clearinghouse. So we can credit an account in one bank and debit an account in another. Very, very sweet, right? Even written checks can be scanned, so accounts can be credited and debited instantly. Okay, which reduces the concept of float, which is money that's sitting out there. All right. In fact, today I just downloaded an app for my phone for my bank that allows me to take a picture of a check, and it'll send the picture to my bank, and they can digitally scan it and deposit it, assuming it's approved, deposit it right into my account. I'm really excited about that, trying it out, because it's going to save me time. Because right now I don't use a physical bank. I have an online bank. And so I usually have to mail in my checks, and that's always an iffy process because I don't know how long it's going to take to get there. There could be some problem along the ways. They could lose my envelope. Who knows what can happen, right? So I can take a picture of it instantly. I can be anywhere. Someone writes me a check, click, done, deposited. I don't have to think about it ever again. Sweet, I just got the money. Right? So it reduces float, which is the time it takes from when you get the money to it actually shows up in your account. Very, very nice. Now, this whole automated clearinghouse system now is still based upon an older technology or older problem, which was dealing with sending information across for all these different banks. Okay, do we need automatic clearinghouses today? Well, we do need some means of sending electronic messages to and from banks. Does it have to go through a clearinghouse, though? And that's kind of the question I've asked myself. And I would say, maybe not. There might be a different way of accomplishing this. So, for example, credit card transactions, is there a better way of doing it? Possibly. Okay, there might be a way we can directly deposit money into our bank account and we said like electronic cash might have been one possibility, but we saw the problems with electronic cash. Can we send electronic dollars, electronic account information directly to another bank account? The answer is, at least from my understanding of technology, is technologically it's possible to skip the automated clearinghouse and to directly deposit it. Now, you still need some piece of software that recognizes a lot of different bank accounts and can send it to them. But you can bypass the automatic clearinghouse and just directly deposit it into a bank. Is it going to happen? Well, I would say that there is stuff stopping these changes. Okay, mostly it's regulations. Okay, now don't kid yourself into thinking that the banking industry has been deregulated. It hasn't. Look at the amount of pages of regulations that banks have to abide by. And in spite of the talk that there's been some deregulation of the banking industry, and by some they mean one law out of millions of regulations. Yes, that's right. So the regulations have continued to grow over the last 100 years. Every single year, it has grown. In spite of these supposed deregulations, the regulations have actually grown, as it's grown in different areas. And now if you think of how regulations work, it basically says, banks, you have to do it this way by law. If you don't, we're going to fine you. So what banks do, they do it the way they're supposed to do it. Can they innovate then? Well, not within that little bubble of area that's regulated. So they have to try to innovate in areas where there are no regulations. And that's oftentimes very difficult. And so what a lot of these innovations are going to have to come from is outside the banking industry, because the banking industry is so heavily regulated that it really has very little flexibility and innovation. And so you see companies like Dola trying to come around that. We're also going to see like the mobile phone market, not just apps through like Google, but you might have an app through Verizon or AT&T that allows you to buy things with your cell phone, and it'll be charged to your phone bill. So basically your phone will become your own personal transaction tool. And it'll be charged to your phone bill. Will you even need a bank account anymore? Well, you might still need some way of storing your money, but your transactions are can completely change. All right. So the automated clearinghouse is the old way of doing things. I see a lot of potential for it to change over time, specifically because of the regulations in the banking industry can actually hurt it long term. All right, online transaction problems. And even though I kind of touched on one problem in the banking industry, I don't think it's really a problem. I just see it as a long-term trend. I see it changing. Current problems, and there's two really big ones, is money laundering and identity theft. Okay, so some of you may have heard the term money laundering, and if you've watched any, the gangster movies, they probably talk a little bit about it. What is money laundering? Well, the concept of dirty money is basically money that has been used to purchase something that's illegal, right? Money or that's been acquired through some illegal activity. So, for example, if you sell drugs, illegal drugs, the money collected from that sale is considered dirty money. Well, criminals realize that there's serial numbers in all those dollar bills. And if they've just made a large purchase of, drugs, that money, it might be possible to track the money through the serial number. And so and if you can track the trail, so it might go from person A to person B to person C, all this money, they can track how the money has flowed through the illegal system. So the black market. Well, they don't like that. They don't want it to be tracked back to the head honcho. So they do something called money laundering, which is taking this, what's called dirty money, and making it clean through various processes. And one common one, and this is how kind of Vegas gets a bad name, because it used to do this many years ago. It was typical to take this dirty money into, let's say, a Las Vegas casino. They'll come in one door, and they'll trade in all their money for chips. Okay, so they take the dirty money, trade it in for chips. So now the casino has all the dirty money. They walk the chips over to the other door, where there's another chip station. They trade all the chips back in for money. And now they're walking out with clean money. It's no longer traceable. That's a very simplified version of money laundering. Now, they can also use it to buy various products. Any way they can do that to make the money untraceable, essentially, is what they're trying to do. So money laundering really grew to be a problem with the e-cash that was being used. So the Bitcoin and all the other genres of buying and selling. So you could buy goods with illegally obtained money, sell those goods for legit cash. Electronic cash does not have an identity, so it's susceptible to money laundering. And it's always been a big problem with it. So electronic cash, it's something that I don't know if there is a quick and easy solution to that. And I know that I'm sure that our government is trying to figure out a way to overcome a lot of these limitations with sending cash electronically. They don't have an answer yet. Okay, because if you try to put too big a burden on sending cash electronically, people won't do it and completely destroy that industry. But then again, they want to stop this illegal activity. So it's a big problem, right? And I don't think there is a solution to it at this point. Second problem, identity theft. All right, so there's the whole grand theft of identity problem, where like a hacker can break into a bank or a merchant servers and obtain millions of accounts, information on those accounts, so usernames and passwords or whatever. There's also a much more singular attack called a phishing attack. Right? So the grand theft, I'm not going to really spend a whole lot of time on it. You've heard the stories. They tend to be very popular in the news. Because it affects millions of people, right? What people don't talk about as much, and they should, are things called phishing attacks. When you essentially try to trick a user into providing username and password information. So here's an example of an email you might receive. Okay. Now, if you look at the very top, it says, from Bank of America. bankofamerica@service.com. Subject, Bank of America notice, your online account security status. And here's all the contents of the email. Now, you'll look at it and say, okay, look, it has the Bank of America logo. It looks very professionally done. Even at the bottom of it, it says Bank of America in a member FDIC, equal housing lender, yada, 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 U.S. official sponsor of the 2004-2008 U.S. Olympic teams. Everything looks very, very professionally done. There's one problem with this. It was never sent by Bank of America. And how do you know this, though? Right? It looks good, and you see even a link there. Click here to update your account. You click on that link. Guess what? It does not take you to the Bank of America website. It often takes you to a website that might say some IP address, http://101.58.206.3/login.php. Now, most people, though, when they click on that link, and when you go to this link, the page itself will still look like official Bank of America standards. The problem is, it's not until you look at the URL that you realize something's not right there. Okay. This is a major, major problem because it does actually trick a lot of people who don't know a lot about how the internet works. They're just simply not knowledgeable enough to realize, okay, this is a fake email and it's sending me to a fake website. So what happens, people enter the login and password voluntarily, they put it in, and it's actually going to a different server, not a Bank of America server. It's being stored for later. They can break into your account. Okay. And here's the thing. They'll send these emails to millions and millions of people. They don't even know if you have a Bank of America account. They don't care. All they're doing is hoping that some of the Bank of America customers will get the email and will be foolish enough to actually enter information. So what can we do about it? How can you prevent identity theft? Okay. Well, we did talk a little bit about privacy earlier. Identity theft is a place where it goes beyond just basic privacy, but goes into trying to steal your whole identity about who you are. Now, most of us don't like the idea of becoming hermits, right, and not interacting at all, especially online, right? I would hate to have to not interact online because I love interacting online. So how do you prevent this? Well, do be conscious of the information that you add online. So yes, you can if you're going to put your address online, be very sure that that's something you're willing to share with other people. If you're going to enter your credit card number, give your credit card number to an e-commerce website, be very confident that that company is a legitimate merchant. A big area that a lot of people ignore, like they have a lot of trust issues for online sites, but one thing they also often forget is that they'll throw away in their trash all kinds of personal information that can be stolen. If I went through trash cans, and I've actually heard about a study. It was actually one of my former professors at Auburn who did this. He got permission from the police office. He and a couple graduate assistants, actually his graduate assistants did most of the dirty work, went to a dumpster behind the student dorms and proceeded to go through the trash can, the big dumpster in the back, looking for information about that students threw away. So once it's been thrown away, it's considered abandoned property. And if it's been abandoned, you no longer have a right to it anymore. Well, guess what? People throw away credit card numbers. They throw away passwords that are written down on a little Post-it notes. Just throw it in the trash, not even thinking about it. It's like, oh, it's going in the trash can. Who's going to see it? Well, anybody can go through your trash and get it. Okay. Then they can collect an entire profile. So they find a big bag of your stuff, and you might find, 2 credit card numbers and a login and password to your bank account, and bam, before you know it, they can get all your money. All right. If you don't have one now, buy a shredder. Buy a shredder. Use it for any type of personal information, especially bank information, credit card information. Shred it, shred it, shred it. Okay. For electronic information, be very careful about who you share your information with. Be very conscious and very aware of who you're sharing information with. It's a pain in the butt to get your identity back if someone steals it. And I've heard stories about people that have had it stolen, and it's a pain. You don't want to have to go through it, because basically you have to try to reprove that you are you and that this other person is not you. How do you do that if it's all in electronic information, right? It's not easy. How do you detect phishing attacks? Well, number one, if you ever go to a website, especially from an email, that is an IP address and not a domain name, that should be a big red flag. Do not enter any information. The reason why they're using an IP address versus a domain name is usually because they don't want you to know the domain name, because they know they don't have the right domain name, and they're just trying to trick you. Right? Also realize that most banks and financial institutions will not ask you, or will not put a link in an email to go log in. So anytime you get an email that says, go log in to verify yada yada yada, that's a phishing attack. 99% of the time. Right? Don't do it. Instead, clicking on the link in the email, go to the browser and type in the URL that you know works directly into the browser to go to that website. That is the best method to avoid those phishing attacks. All right, what do you do if your identity has been stolen? Well, there's a lot of things you can do. I shouldn't say a lot. The main thing is you have to get in touch with like your credit card company or the various companies that have your information. You need to change your credit card numbers. You need to change whatever it is that you can be changed. And you need to contact the companies where the fraud has happened and let them know and see what their process is for verifying your identity and what is not legitimate. Now, I've heard about a lot of different companies that help you protect your identity. I have not personally used any to verify their authenticity, how well they work. It's also good to do occasional audits of your own identity. So if you look at your free credit reports, you should look at your credit report occasionally to see if someone has been using your identity to buy goods, because they can screw your credit history that way too. The commercials they put online are actually, in some ways, legit in that people can screw your identity that way, and you wouldn't even know it. So do look at it. You don't have to use those companies, though. Sometimes they try to bait and switch you into paying for something you really don't need. The free credit reports are provided to you by the three major credit bureaus for free by law. So they have to do it at least once a year. So you got 3 of them. You can do like one every 4 months and keep checking. But yes, if it does get stolen, though, go find out from the organization or from the companies that the fraud has taken place with, how best to deal with it, because each one has their own particular process and rules. So, what are we talking about today? We got our payment systems, right? Credit cards, debit cards, eCash, and e-wallets. Okay, those are how we do things online right now. We also talked about banking, clearinghouses, and then problems with online banking, including identity theft and phishing attacks. Right. Hopefully, though, as we move forward, we'll find that our payment systems online do improve. The big issue, obviously, is the trust one, but we want to make it as easy as possible, but not so easy that people can use our identity to steal our money. Right? And that's kind of the key. We want it to be as easy as possible, but not so easy that people can steal our money. All right, and that's all we got for today.